Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Monday, September 27th, 2021. And as always, if you'd like additional weather information, maybe expound upon some of the details I speak of, you can find them at weather.gov/Alaska if you have the ability to get online. And if you have any interesting comments, questions, or photos to pass along, you can reach me at peter.chan@noaa.gov. Well, in the weather headlines, it was a crisp and clear weekend, especially Sunday into this Monday across the southwest and south central interiors. Many areas experienced their coldest night so far this season, widespread hard freeze, and a number of temperatures even got down in the teens, Bristol Bay, King Salmon, and further north into the central interior, 2 above at the entrance of Denali Park, and 6 above at Manly Hot Springs, and we'll continue to see some rather cold temperatures yet again going into Tuesday morning. We're going to be watching a strong low develop in the north central Bering, perhaps down around 960 millibars by Wednesday night, and that same feature will eventually impact the Gulf later in the week. But in the meantime, a weaker area of low pressure will be sliding along just south of Kodiak Island and then out into the Gulf tomorrow and into Wednesday, which will impact especially the Panhandle with some gale force winds and some periods of moderate to heavier rain as we go through Tuesday and Wednesday. But then that Bering low energy is going to drop down into the western Gulf by late Friday, early Saturday, and that could produce a second stronger low with the central pressure down perhaps around 940 millibars. So that'll bring very windy conditions and area of precipitation that will affect much of the Gulf region. So we'll look at that as the week unfolds. But coming up, I wanted to show you this image I took from Kenai Beach there overlooking Cook Inlet. What a beautiful Sunday early afternoon. You can see Mount Read out there in the distance, and I can see the Alaska Range to the north, including Denali. And if you look up there to the upper right of the screen, that is the waning gibbous moon. In fact, the moon will be at last quarter phase come tomorrow, but it was just an absolutely beautiful scene yesterday afternoon. I even saw a pod of beluga whales working their way along the inlet there, and they went up into the mouth of the Kenai River for a time. So quite a sight to see. Fall is a beautiful time when skies clear out in Alaska. Well, we are enjoying some clearing right now in south central areas due to the fact we've had kind of in-between systems and a ridge of high pressure, but we do have low pressure that is still crossing now the southern tip there of the Alaska Peninsula that'll be emerging into the Gulf during the day tomorrow and then working its way east-northeastward and impacting the Panhandle, especially later Tuesday into Wednesday with some additional rainfall and gale force winds. Off to the north, the cold air is settled in there along the Brooks Range, North Slope, Arctic coast, where it temperatures during the daytime now have generally slipped below freezing and will not be getting above freezing anytime soon. Looking off to the west, though, there is energy coming in out of eastern Russia, and that's going to help spin up an area of low pressure in addition to very strong upper level wind, jet stream winds that are entering the western Bering. That is going to help spin up that area of low pressure just to the southwest of St. Lawrence and west of St. Matthew Island as we go through the midweek. Now here is the weather map this afternoon, and we see the low crossing the tip there of the Alaska Peninsula with another low out there just southeast of Haida Gwaii with a trough lingering back through just off the coast there of the Panhandle, still keeping some lighter showers going, but that low, as it works its way eastward south of Kodiak Island, will emerge into the Gulf, bringing additional rain and gale force winds. Back to the west, you can see cold front in eastern Russia, and that's all part of that energy that's going to be moving into the northern portions of the Bering and spinning up that stronger low. Still weak high pressure along the Alcan border extending into south central areas, so that'll set the stage for a very cold night again where skies remain clear into Tuesday morning. We can see that low just to the southeast of Kodiak Island as we go through the overnight and into early Tuesday, with areas of rain, and then back out to the west. That cold front continues to push into the Bering Sea from off of Russia. And as we go into Tuesday, the low in the Gulf will just kind of spin up and sit there through the central areas, and there'll be an occluded front working its way northeastward up into the Panhandle, bringing additional winds and rounds of occasionally moderate rain by the time we get into late Tuesday and certainly on Wednesday. Now back to the west, though, combining that with the lift being provided by the strong jet core aloft, that's going to help spin up a very strong area of low pressure in the vicinity of and just west of St. Matthew in the Bering on Tuesday night into Wednesday. And by Wednesday afternoon, there'll be a low down around 970 millibars, and it's still deepening. It will have storm force winds around it, and also the potential for some hurricane force gusts as that low continues to deepen Wednesday night into early Thursday. Meanwhile, the low out in the Gulf becomes elongated, and that will bring some periods of moderate rain up into the southern half of the Panhandle. Still a little slice of drier air back through the eastern interior down into Cook Inlet, so it may hold on to a little bit of sun there midweek on Wednesday. But by the time we get into the end of the week, especially Friday, that energy is going to emerge from the Bering down into the western Gulf and spin up an even potentially stronger low that could bottom out somewhere around 940 millibars Friday night into Saturday morning. In the meantime, precipitation forecast Tuesday, not a whole lot going on across the interior, but you can see the rains out over the Gulf. Those are going to be moving northeastward up into the Panhandle, especially areas around Ketchikan. Craig could pick up an inch or two of rainfall there later Tuesday and into the day on Wednesday. Low temperatures for Tuesday morning, lower mid-40s in the Panhandle where the cloud cover holds, but Glen Ellen could be down around 10 above with snow cover and clear skies. A number of spots there across the south central interior will be in the teens. Coastal areas down around or a bit above freezing where the clouds move in there in the Alaska Peninsula. High temperatures Tuesday afternoon, lower 50s across portions of the southeast, but you can see the interior generally in the 40s, though still upper 40s to near 50 where there's some sun around the Kenai back towards, say, Cordova. And then Wednesday morning, lows will generally be still low mid-40s across the Panhandle, but areas, Glen Ellen could dip down to 8 above with clear skies, a weak ridge of high pressure in place. But where the clouds are, southern end of the Kenai and into Kodiak Island, look for lows generally above freezing, mid-30s to lower 40s. And high temperatures on Wednesday afternoon beneath the rain, only around 50 or so there in the Panhandle. Generally in the 40s back through south central areas and the coast. Could see temperatures generally in the 40s to near 50. Up there along the north slope, lows will be well down into the 20s, teens, Brooks Range areas of the interior, east central where skies are clear. In fact, some of the normally really cold spots could be down near 0 to 5 above. And then for Tuesday afternoon, highs will stay below freezing along the north slope and into the Brooks Range, and get above freezing, though, into the mid-30s to around 40 degrees through the Yukon Valley. And then low temperatures Wednesday morning. Again, many teens being reported there across the interior with some locally colder readings. Cloud cover to the west, lows along the coast near freezing. And then for Wednesday afternoon, highs will generally be confined below freezing there, the Brooks Range through the north slope and Arctic coast, mid-30s to around 40 degrees elsewhere. And then across the Alaska Peninsula, lows this morning where skies still hold on to some clearing, could dip down well below freezing into the 20s, but where the clouds are increasing and thickening across the Alaska Peninsula, lows generally staying above freezing with some 40s as you get out there along the peninsula into the Aleutians. And then highs Tuesday afternoon, generally in the lower 40s across the interior. Places like Bethel on up toward Aniak, Emanuk, and on up toward McGrath. And then out along the peninsula into the Aleutians, upper 40s to low 50s. Wednesday morning lows still below freezing there along the Alaska Range and into interior of Bristol Bay, but otherwise lows lower 40s there through the farther out along the Alaska Peninsula and into the Aleutians. And high temperatures Wednesday afternoon, that low is going to bypass the mainland, passing out into the Gulf. So areas of the interior could still see at least partly sunny skies. Temperatures only around upper 30s, around 40 toward the Alaska range, lower to mid 40s as you get toward the southwest coast, and around 50 extending out along the length of the Alaska Peninsula. And have no warm news for you as far as the temperature outlook for early October, October 3rd through the 7th, is featuring below normal temperatures centered on south central areas, Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound eastward into the northern panhandle. The reason the pattern is very stubborn, we have warmer air stuck over the interior west of the lower 48, so this keeps us Alaska in a chilly pattern. No really warm fall weather, and precipitation very well could average a bit above normal across the southwest, south central, as well as portions of the panhandle. So fall is here, and it's going to stay chilly.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, it's time now for your aviation weather, and if you are planning a flight Tuesday into Wednesday, the main weather player will be an area of low pressure that is currently tracking across the far end of the Alaska Peninsula. It'll emerge south and then just southeast of Kodiak Island on Tuesday as it works its way toward the central Gulf. That's going to fling more moisture, frontal band, on up into the southeast panhandle. Later on in the week, as we get into later Wednesday and especially Thursday, Friday, we're going to be watching a stronger low that could bottom out near 960 millibars just to the west of St. Matthew out there in the northern central bearing. That energy will drop southeastward and could potentially spin up a low down around 940 millibars in through the Gulf late in the week. So stay tuned for that, because that could become a major wind and weather maker here as we go through the end of this week. Meantime, IFR conditions, some of the inner waterway along the mountains there back out toward Kodiak Island, and then also up along portions of the west central interior on up through the North Slope and Arctic coast and around St. Lawrence. We'll see Tuesday afternoon IFR conditions along the frontal band there out in through the Gulf, and then back up along the North Slope and Arctic coast, as well as off the west coast, including St. Lawrence Island. And Wednesday morning, look for IFR conditions rather extensive there along the North Slope and Arctic coast, continuing and extending from the western Seward Peninsula back across St. Lawrence in through much of the central bearing. And then finally, Wednesday afternoon, maybe a little bit of improvement, generally VFR with some MVFR across much of the interior and the southeast panhandle, as well as the Alaska Peninsula. And along the west coast, though more extensive AFR will likely be associated in the vicinity of that deepening low in the vicinity west there of St. Matthew. Past conditions on Tuesday, AKwx looking for MVFR becoming VFR. That'll also be the case for Adigan. And then further south and west, Lake Clark will be VFR throughout the day on Tuesday, but Merrill could start out MVFR, improving to VFR later morning and afternoon. And as we round through the central Alaska range, rainy as well as windy passes, generally MVFR throughout the day Tuesday. Further east, look for VFR conditions to prevail on Tuesday at Isabel, as well as Mentasta. And then dropping further south and west, Tanita should also see VFR conditions throughout the day on Tuesday, as will Portage Pass. And then further east, the northern panhandle, Chilkoot and White could see a period of IFR in the overnight early morning, giving way to VFR conditions, though conditions will tend to deteriorate as we head into Tuesday night, Wednesday, as that frontal band approaches from the Gulf. And looking at freezing levels, they are down below the surface in the morning across much of the interior. You're looking at freezing levels aloft, upwards around 4,000 feet through the central panhandle and just south of the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. Best chance for icing will be associated with that low pressure that'll be tracking south and then southeast of Kodiak Island as it begins to emerge into the Gulf between 6,000 and 14,000 feet. Otherwise, fairly extensive areas for potential for some minor isolated icing, parts of the far southern panhandle through the Yukon, back into the northwest, and out over the central and northern bearing. Jet stream level winds are strongest south of the Gulf there in the North Pacific. West-northwest winds, jet core upwards to around 150 knots, and then also another jet core upwards to 120 knots out through the far western bearing there west of the western Aleutians coming in off of Japan, and then dropping down to 9,000 feet, low pressure circulation there in through the Gulf with southwest flow to 45 knots coming on up in through Haida Gwaii, and then back out across much of the central and western Bering. Winds out of the west 50 to upwards to 60 knots, and then finally coming down to 3,000 feet, we see low pressure circulation there. Back through the central Gulf, the frontal bands, winds out ahead of it, southeasterly upwards to 45 to shifting to the southwest 55 knots as that front works its way up toward British Columbia and the Panhandle inner waterways. And then back out to the west, we're seeing broad winds upwards around 40 knots from generally a west-southwest direction there across much of the western portion of the Bering back toward Japan. And turbulence, most likely, there's surface to 6,000 feet, central and southern parts of the Panhandle, and then back out the tip of the Alaska Peninsula through the eastern Aleutians, surface to 3,000 feet on the backside of that area of low pressure that'll be tracking south and southeast of Kodiak Island.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, joined again by Eric Stevens of GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And Eric, thanks so much for joining us again tonight.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks, Eric. And we've been talking about the complex gathering of information from satellites, looking down on the surface of the planet. And some of those orbits around the planet work for Alaska, and some of them don't. There's a lot of challenges with those. How can we get better imagery for the poles and specifically for Alaska?
Right. Well, today we're going to talk about a very interesting kind of satellite orbit that has potential to be real helpful for the high latitudes.
Okay.
Especially us here in Alaska. Canadians, Russians, Norwegians will all be interested in this. The satellites are not in orbit yet. Now the future is uncertain, but it's possible, and if this happens, it will be wonderful for Alaska. Okay. It's called the highly elliptical orbit.
Oh, that sounds
it's interesting. Yeah. And I think first, to help our discussion, we should get back to some of Kepler's laws and how do satellites work.
Sure.
Kepler's first law, an orbit of a planet around a sun or a weather satellite around the Earth is not necessarily a circle, it's an ellipse.
Okay.
And the highly elliptical orbit takes advantage of this aspect. We're going to put the Earth in one of the ellipse and then stretch one of the foci of the ellipse and then stretch that ellipse out real far to make it highly elliptical.
The foci is that bend part of the end of the ellipse. If you're going to stretch out a rubber band, that would be the center, kind of the stretchy part.
Yes.
Ends. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then Kepler's second law says that the closer something is to the thing that it's orbiting, the faster it goes.
Okay.
We see this in the solar system, that Mercury flies around the sun real fast. Jupiter, much slower. Jupiter's further away, it's slower. Mercury's closer in, it's faster. This happens with weather satellites too. Even satellites like the International Space Station, it's pretty close to the Earth. It goes around the Earth in only 90 minutes. That thing is moving. It's only 250 miles away. So how can we take advantage of these two aspects of Kepler's laws of motion to get better weather surveillance of Alaska? And this highly elliptical orbit is going to be the approach. So we have with us today our friendly planet Earth and our simulated satellite, the lid off of this salt shaker
like
here.
Sputnik there. Yeah.
There it is. It's shiny, it's metal, it's space-worthy. And what we want to be able to do is, could you have a satellite hover over the top of the world, up over Alaska? You can't really do that. Geostationary satellites have to be over the equator. Okay. So how could we almost solve this? And this is the tricky part. Maybe should we tilt the Earth over?
Focus on the pole. That's what we're trying to accomplish here, right?
So here we have the northern side of the planet, and we're going to trace out the orbit of a satellite with this salt shaker lid here. Now imagine a highly elliptical orbit. So let's put the Earth in one of the foci of the ellipse, and we'll have an imaginary foci out here. So the satellite will not go in a circle around the Earth, but will be in this long strung out ellipse. So the satellite will go...
Kind of like a racetrack.
Yes, there you go, like a racetrack. So it's an oval elliptical shape like that. And notice now that when the satellite's over here, we've got a nice view of the northern hemisphere around. There's Alaska, Russia, Canada, Greenland, all there. So that's the ellipse aspect of an orbit, Kepler's first law. The second law saying that when you're further away as a satellite, you go slower. And this we can take real
okay.
advantage of. Because the way this orbit works, when the satellite goes over Antarctica here,
Right.
it's going to be close to the Earth. It's
Okay.
going to be moving, whoosh, goes on by. And then as it comes out here, it will slow down. This increases what is known as the dwell time. The satellite will just hang here looking for hours at Alaska and the high Arctic. And then eventually it will come around and it will accelerate and whiz around the South Pole and then come back and hang here for a while because it's further away from the planet. It goes slower.
Yeah.
It has to. That's the laws of motion. And such like that, repeating.
Wow.
Now, the real important way to make this work is you have to have two satellites. So that while one is whipping around the pole, you've got the other one out here, and they work as a team. You could then get a series of images of Alaska that can be almost from a constant frame of reference.
Right.
And you can loop them together to make movies. You can take a picture every 10 minutes, say, of Alaska, and then loop it, playing it at several frames a second. You could see the clouds whiz on by. You know, the Weather Channel, weather broadcasters in the lower 48 especially can show these movie loops from the geostationary satellites. In Alaska, we've never really been able to do that very well, especially in the higher, most northern parts of the state, because those geostationary satellites are over the equator. It's not a good view. And this highly elliptical orbit whipping around the South Pole and then dwelling up here would be a way for us to get that constant frame of reference and do really good weather surveillance over the Arctic, seeing where those storms are, where they're going. Nothing quite like a movie loop of the weather in time to really illustrate what's important, what's going on.
And compared to what we have right now, we just have small windows or snapshots of what's going on with the polar orbiters. We don't have that long range view that's looking top down to give us that complete motion picture that helps us understand so much of the atmosphere at this
There's
point.
so many different kinds of satellites. Each has their advantage. Each is important, and the highly elliptical orbit satellite will also fit into that scheme. It's a nifty idea to solve an Alaskan challenge.
That's fantastic. Well, that sounds really exciting. And again, kind of a satellite dream of the future to come. Okay, very good. Thanks for joining us today, Eric. We really appreciate the information. And if you'd like to learn more about what Eric does at GINA, at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, we invite you to visit the web address that you see on your screen there. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and now it's time for marine weather. And one thing, if you didn't catch the notice here in the last few days, it was announced the minimum ice retreat there for 2021 occurred on September 16th. So that's the farthest north the ice had retreated and reached its minimum extent. And now we're starting to see the ice slowly build back off toward the south as we slide deeper into the autumn season and eventually winter. And looking at what we have coming up, there is one area of low pressure that is going to emerge into the Gulf Tuesday into Wednesday, and that's going to bring an occluded front up along the southeast panhandle, with it at least 30-knot south winds for offshore, perhaps even some gale force gust. In inner waterways on Tuesday, we'll see winds generally 10 to 20 knots from the southeast, with waves of 2 to 4 feet, and then out there offshore in the open waters, waves upwards of 10, 11 feet. During the day on Wednesday, winds will turn more northwesterly along the inner waters away, especially from Petersburg up north through Lynn Canal. Still southeasterly down there toward the mouth of Dixon Entrance. Also southeasterly winds continuing off the coast, with waves of anywhere from 9, 10 feet Craig up to Gustavus, to as much as 13 feet offshore of Yakutat. And then for south central areas on Tuesday, winds will generally be out of the northeast, 15 knots Prince William Sound and the upper portion of Cook Inlet, with waves only a couple of feet. But as we get further down the line, off the Kenai, in the open waters of the northern Gulf, there are 25 knots and waves 7 to 8 feet down toward Kodiak, as well as 6, 7 feet there toward the mouth of Cook Inlet. And then as we go into Wednesday, look for winds to generally have a north or northwesterly component, 10 knots there in through Prince William Sound in the northern half of Cook Inlet, with waves only a couple of feet, and then west-northwest winds from the entrance of Cook Inlet out off of the Kenai, with waves of 7 to perhaps as high as 10 feet. On Tuesday, Kodiak Island will see northeast winds pick up 25, 30 knots, waves 10 to 12 feet along the North Pacific side as that low passes south of Kodiak Island and out to the southeast of Kodiak Island by Tuesday afternoon. Winds northerly there south of Bristol Bay and on up the north side there of the Bering side, with waves of 6 to 8 feet. And then on Wednesday, we'll see winds turning west to southwest and increasing the further southwest you get down along the length of the Alaska Peninsula to 40-knot gales and waves as high as 17 feet on the North Pacific side there south of Sand Point, and north of Cold Bay, 14-footers with much stronger winds and higher waves further west and northwest of there. Across the Aleutians on Tuesday, winds will generally be out of the northwest around 20-25 knots, waves 9 to 12 feet on the North Pacific side, 7 to 9 feet on the Bering side, and generally 6-foot waves west of Adak. And then as we go into Wednesday, deepening low pressure up near St. Matthew Island is really going to be cranking up gale and storm force winds widespread. And on the on the Bering side of things, waves will be running at least 15 to 20 feet with 40-knot westerly gales. On the North Pacific side, we're looking at waves of 12 to 16 feet with 40-knot gales. And then as we go up along the west coast, that's where the real action will be, especially out over the central and northern Bering. Winds on Tuesday still kind of more of a west or northwesterly direction, as high as 30 knots there south of Nunavik Island, 7-footers there down towards St. Paul, St. George. And then as we go into Wednesday, by Wednesday afternoon and evening, we're seeing a deepening area of low pressure in the vicinity of St. Matthew that could bottom out around 960 millibars with storm force winds there in the vicinity of St. Matthew Island, 55 knots, 25-foot waves, and even higher, perhaps even some hurricane force gust west and northwest of St. Matthew. And then on Tuesday for the Arctic coast, winds will be out of the east-northeast, 10 knots, waves generally 4 feet, and going down along the lower Chukchi Sea, northwest coast to west of Kotzebue Sound. Easterly to northeasterly winds at 10 to 15 knots, waves generally running around 4 feet. And for Wednesday, easterly winds continue along the Arctic coast, 15 to 20 knots, waves generally around 5 feet, and going down there through the lower Chukchi Sea and the Bering Strait, winds will be out of the east, 20-25 knots, waves 5 to 6 feet, though as you get south of the Bering Strait down toward St. Lawrence, winds and waves will be higher, upwards to 35-knot gales, 10-foot waves north of St. Lawrence Island. And there's the low pressure Tuesday in the Gulf. Low will be forming, though, on Wednesday and deepening Wednesday afternoon across the northern and central Bering. Could bottom out around 960 millibars later Wednesday night. That's all the time I have. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.